So we are going to start on Kul Tiras. Kul Tiras is an island chain kingdom located just south of the Broken Isles. It was originally discovered and settled by the kingdom of Gilneas. Originally, the Kul Tiran Isles were inhabited by the Drust, which we see on Drustvar. They were originally inhabited by the Drust. They were driven out and killed by the Kul Tiran settlers, but while they were killed, they did remain on the island in some force, since they were highly magical beings. So they kind of stored their souls away in various things like stones and wood effigies and stuff like that, because now they are trying to make their way back into the physical world, and that's kind of what we see happening in Drustvar whenever you guys quest there. They're trying to force their way back into the physical world in order to retake the island in their fallen brethren's name. So Kul Tiras as a whole has one of the strongest navies on Azeroth, if not the strongest. I believe it is only rivaled by the Zandalari. The island functioned as a major war hub during the Second and Third War up until the disbandment of the Alliance of Lordaeron, and with the perceived betrayal of Jaina Proudmoore, Kul Tiras became more and more isolated and less involved with the affairs of the Alliance. Most of its economy, seeing it as an island, is focused around mercantile exports of its natural resources. Wood, ore, and fish are big exports. So a little bit of the history of the leadership of Kul Tiras. Kind of the first ruler or Lord Admiral that we see mentioned in game is Lord Admiral Dalen Proudmoore, which is Jaina Proudmoore's dad. He was also the Grand Admiral of the Alliance of Lordaeron. Kind of a little bit of history on him is that he was an absolute ruthless enemy of the Horde, believing that they were all bloodthirsty monsters to kill, mostly thinking that of the orcs. His daughter Jaina fled Lordaeron to go to Kalimdor after the invasion of the Scourge. She managed to encounter and gain Thrall's trust after assisting him with defeating Grom Hellscream, and she founded Theramore. Meanwhile, we see Dalen waging war with the orcs, with the Kul Tiras Navy and Marines. Rexxar and Thrall obviously are quite upset about this. Eventually, Dalen did find Jaina, and Jaina tried to convince Dalen that the new horde that Thrall had founded was not like the old horde. He was unconvinced of this and continued the war against the new horde. So we see that Dalen kind of took over Theramore during this time, and when Rexxar and Thrall brought a force to Theramore in order to try to retake it, Jaina betrayed her father and basically helped them get the goblin ships that were kind of able to help in defeating the Kul Tiran Navy. In this battle, Rexxar actually ended up killing Dalen Proudmoore. Kul Tiras as a whole shunned Jaina, viewed her as both a traitor to her father and her nation, because not only did she help Thrall, but she ordered all of the Theramore troops that were under her command to not assist the Kul Tiran Marine. So BFA marks the first time since the Third War that Jaina has actually been in Kul Tiras. But because of this, they became very isolated because they desired vengeance against the Horde because of obviously the death of their leader. But the Alliance of Lordaeron was too concerned with the imminent collapse and the scourge that was currently ravaging their lands around this time with Arthas and all that. The Kul Tirans notably held no grudge against the Alliance leadership. They mostly focused all of their hate on Jaina and the Horde, so they kind of just stepped away, I guess to say. The leader going into BFA is Catherine Proudmoore, which is Jaina's mom and Dalen's wife. So we see Kul Tiras is ruled by 4 houses. We have House Proudmoore, obviously, House Waycrest, House Stormsong, and House Ashfane. Each house has a seat on the council that rules the whole nation. The strength of each seat varies in terms of political power, which kind of leads to a little bit of infighting within the houses. So House Proudmoore of Tiergard Sound is led by Lord Admiral Catherine Proudmoore. This house primarily controls the military and the guard, and since the house also contains the Lord Admiral, is basically in charge of the nation as a whole. There is House Waycrest of Justvar, led by Arthur Waycrest. This region of Kul Tiras provides most of the kingdom's ore and various other resources, most notably being most of the warriors and troops come from the Justvar area. Notably, they have been an incredibly loyal supporter of House Proudmoore, and have backed their ruling for centuries. We have House Stormstrong of Stormsong Valley, led by Lord Stormsong. This area, Stormsong Valley, is mostly where the ships are built for their navy, also where tide sages are trained, which are a big part of their culture, which I'll get to next. They also bless the ships for the navy. House Ashvane is the last house, led by Priscilla Ashvane. They mostly control the nation's wealth, the banking, and I guess kind of more of the mercantile aspects. They own a lot of the warehouses, a lot of the companies, a lot of the shipyards, that type of thing. So an important part of Kul Tiran culture are tide sages. They are devoted to the ocean. Think of them kind of like shamans, but they purely focus on like water magic and things to do with water. All of the Kul Tiran vessels are blessed by the tide sages. They commune with the sea to guide the nation's legendary fleets. The Kul Tiran's largest ships always have a tide sage on board to help them navigate through storms, help them, withstand the heavy seas, and even they can put wind in the sails. Another thing of note is most people in Kul Tiras look to the seas for guidance in the same way that we see the Alliance as a whole look to the light. So tide sages are kind of like priests. If there was a direct comparison, they have a very deep connection with the sea, much like a priest or a paladin would have a very deep connection with the light. Alrighty, so we're going to transition into talking about Zandalar. So Zandalar is an island. It's located just north of Pandaria. It's home to, obviously, the Zandalari tribe of trolls, and it's actually considered the birthplace of troll civilization. Its three main areas that we see are Zuldazar, Nazmir, and Vol'dun. Zuldazar is one of the last places that isn't really touched by a major event. Nazmir used to be a jungle, much similar to Zuldazar, but after the cataclysm it was turned largely into swamplands. And Vol'dun, it's a desert area that once again was very jungly in the past, but it had been ravaged by the Akir, which are like insects to those who don't know. So, interestingly, originally Zandalar was a name given to a holy mountain range in southern Kalimdor. Many wild gods referred to the trolls as Loa. They dwelled there. The trolls revered and worshipped these Loa, and we soon see small encampments on the slopes of these mountains. The tallest plateaus were claimed by a most powerful group of trolls in that area called the Zandalar tribe. Atop the highest peaks, we see the Zandalari trolls constructing a small cluster of crude shrines. Um, they eventually became larger shrines, and now we see it as the bustling temple city known as Zuldazar. During the Akir and Troll War, the old gods would try to assault the Zandalari Mountains, but obviously they failed. So when the first will of eternity had imploded, a hole was punched into Kalimdor. Um, Deep fissures, much akin to what we see happen in the Cataclysm, kind of appeared all over the continent. Um, the Zandalari trolls cast a protective spell on the Zandalar Mountains in order to save their home. They couldn't really shield the rest of the continent from widespread upheaval. Um, so it's largely being destroyed, and they're trying to protect their homeland, but obviously they can't shield everything. So um, the ground beneath the shield was drawn underwater. Kalimdor broke into separate land masses, and when the Sundering was over, the mountain range that they used to call their home was now an island. Zuldazar, as I mentioned before, the capital of Zandalar, is built on a series of large ziggurats. Ziggurats are large structures usually meant for either worship or like a military force. Um, but they're specifically designed to look like towering mountains from a distance. The current ruler is King Rastakhan. He rules the island from a giant golden palace on top of Zuldazar. Um, Different troll tribes have always fought and distrusted one another, but every 6 years, envoys from all the troll tribes alive in Zuldazar, in order to share important information and discuss matters that affect the race as a whole. So we see the Horde coming to Zandalar to seek alliances as the result of beginning to war with the Alliance again. Not only that, but they also have to deal with the blood trolls attacking them from Nazmir, as well as a civil war that's being started by Zol, which is one of Rastakhan's kind of like head council members, as well as Rastakhan himself and his followers. So speaking of Rastakhan, he's the ruler of the empire, as I mentioned. He was blessed by the lower Razan with a long life, swift healing, and strength well beyond most trolls. He sits on a golden throne, lording over all of the island. So he is empowered by the Zandalari gods themselves to act as their voice, and has actually ruled for close to, I believe, actually exceeding 200 years. So he is consulted before every single battle or major decision by the Janchuli Council. They both advise him and ensure that his command is executed. So an interesting thing about Rastakhan is that he prefers that his opponents, many of which are on the Zanchuli Council, are not able to get the information meant for his ears. So while they think it might be easy, he's actually created a special cult that only him and his closest bodyguards, who are named Zelani and Habutu, only those three actually understand that code. Another interesting thing is 46 assassination attempts have been made on him. The last assassin to try was his former wife. So we're going to talk a little bit about what had happened during the Cataclysm. Um, Obviously, a kind of a second end of the world scenario for the Zandalari that they had encountered. So Zol, who is a prophet and a member of the Zanchuli Council, warned Rastakhan of a terrible cataclysm. Zol has been blessed by the Loa to be able to kind of peek into the future. Not everything of what he sees comes to pass in the same way that he sees it, but more or less he's pretty accurate about what kind of like what happens during future events. So he had seen a vision of a great armored fire dragon clenching the world in its jaws, which we now know as Deathwing, and had more or less happened. Zol left on a journey, and when he came back, he kind of had more bad news. Unfortunately, Rastakhan still did absolutely nothing. Zol left again to go on another journey, and when he came back a couple months prior to when the cataclysm would happen, he described that the golden capital of Zandalar was slowly sinking beneath the waves after this cataclysm. And everyone, the once great people of Zandalar, would drown as their mighty works slipped forever beneath the sea. So Zol advised the council and King Rastakhan to unite with the other troll tribes and to basically abandon Zandalar. Unfortunately, neither the council nor King Rastakhan believed what they had said, or what he had said, or at least the scope of it. I mean, that's kind of a ridiculous thing to hear. Many felt that he was trying to basically show off or grandstand in order to make himself more known and gain more powerful. So in kind of a, shall we say, let's get him out of our hair for a little bit, King Rastakhan said, alright, fine, I'll give you some of my largest ships, and that in case this vision were to come to pass, you and your followers can go and find a new land to settle on and go there instead, and if it sinks in here, if this land sinks, then we will we will live on through you, basically. So in response, Zol took the offer, began assembling the fleet, and reaching out to some of the other troll tribes and races. So, obviously, Deathwing did come. The cataclysm did happen. It rocked Zandalar to its very foundation. The Zandalari people turned to King Rastakhan, but only one person really knew what to do. Only one troll, and that was Zol. So even now, even after all of the events that had happened, which resulted in Nazmir largely being flooded, didn't quite fully sink in, but it's still the island is basically slowly sinking. So the Zandalari peasants and the warriors kind of flocked to Zol because what he said is basically happening. So they have, being led by Zol, they kind of issued a call to all of Azeroth's troll populations. They said, unite under a single mighty empire and help save the race for the extinction. And they were like, well, Rastakhan, despite being warned, is still sitting on his throne in Zandalar as the island itself sinks around him. So even like I said before, even today, the Zandalar is still sinking into the sea, and yeah, it's a pretty big deal, at least for them. I hope that we see a little bit more touched on that throughout um, the expansion. So a little bit on their culture, since we had talked about the Kul Tiran culture. Um, the Zandalari tribe, they're very mystical trolls. They have a priest caste and a scholarly caste. That's kind of one of their highest serving functions. Um, they're notably more scholarly than a lot of the other troll tribes. Um, they don't have as many warriors as many other troll tribes have, um, but the warriors that they do have are incredibly skilled and dedicated to protecting their homeland. Um, Whenever they need to accomplish tasks in the world at large, they actually work through the the agents of other races, so orcs and trolls and goblins. Um, if an unfriendly member of any race were to enter Zandalar, he would, um, be contending with these highly trained warriors, which do include the Zandalari prelates, which are basically Zandalari paladins. Um, they are paladins in the way that they actually do derive their power from the light. However, they believe that they get it through the Loa Razan, who is dead, um, because events happen throughout the quest line. I won't spoil too much. Um, but they are true paladins, which is very interesting because they do derive their powers from the light. Um, so Zandalar is largely neutral territory for troll kind. They don't really go there to fight wars. It's kind of one of the few facets where we see trolls being diplomatic. Um, the same courtesy is not really friendly towards other races. Uh, there are a certain tribe within the Zandalari trolls that very much enjoy slaying enemies and eating their remains. Not even goblin merchants are safe there. Many goblins kind of don't want to go there because they face stalking, um, potentially being lured away and killed and eaten. Um, Another thing to note about Zandalari culture, and this I did a little bit of research for Corn on this one because he had asked me about it, is Zandalari trolls actually hate slavery. Um, Strength and knowledge are huge parts of their culture. Uh, so Zandalaris don't believe in slavery. They believe people who do have slaves are weak, and that's why they have slaves. They have to do it themselves. Since the warlock class largely revolves around enslaving demons, it would make sense that a Zandalari wouldn't want to, be a warlock, because unless Blizzard decided to make major changes to how warlocks have worked for the past few years, um, it would kind of be counterculture of them to want to enslave demons, because then they could be perceived as weak because they have to enslave demons in order to be strong. Um, that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be. I'm sure that they could, but largely their culture is restrictive of it, much like Tauren and Draenei rogues. They're not really believing in the whole stabbing and trickery and poisons and whatnot. Um, Another thing to note is that Zandalari druids are actually largely regarded as heretics. They follow the Loa Gonk, who is the Loa of Shapes. They believe that they're heretics because many Zandalari actually don't believe that Gonk is a true Loa. He gained a little bit of favor as we see throughout some of the storylines and quest lines on the Horde side. I won't spoil a whole lot, just because Gonk is kind of, and his involvement with Rastakhan is kind of central to the Horde story, so I don't want to spoil that.